Claire Bennett had always believed that numbers never lied. For 15 years, she carried that belief like a shield, using it to protect Transcend Corporation through mergers, audits, recessions, and board shakeups. Her ledgers told stories no one else could read. Patterns of growth, whispers of risk, the pulse of a company that executives often misread in their rush for profit. When Victor Lang arrived as the new CEO, Claire noticed something almost immediately. He didn't respect the shield. He was all flash and bravado, a man who liked the sound of his own promises more than the silence of facts. Where she saw red flags, he saw opportunities. Where she marked caution, he signed in bold ink. At first, Claire tried to work with him. During his first quarter, she stayed late in her office, carefully crafting reports that highlighted cash flow concerns. She presented risk assessments to his assistant, annotated with suggestions for safer paths. But every document that left her hands came back ignored, stamped with Victor's flamboyant signature. He wasn't interested in checks and balances. He wanted headlines, expansion, and applause. In meetings, Victor would stand at the head of the glass-walled conference room, his designer suit catching the fluorescent light, and dismiss her cautions with a wave. "Claire, you've been here too long. You're thinking small. This is a new era for Transcend. We're going global." The board laughed at his charisma, but Claire noticed the nervous glances from department heads. They were too cautious to speak against him, but she could see the unease in their shifting eyes. Numbers, however, didn't glance away. Numbers told her that Victor's expansion plan leaned on risky loans and overvalued partnerships. One evening, long after the office had emptied, Claire sat in her office surrounded by binders and digital backups. The hum of the server room next door was the only sound. She scrolled through invoices from a subsidiary in Singapore and noticed discrepancies, amounts rounded in ways that never matched her style of accounting. Follow-up transfers landed in shell accounts, carefully disguised as vendor payments. To most, it was noise. To Claire, it was a confession typed in digits. She leaned back, heart thudding. Victor hadn't just ignored her warnings. He had started bending numbers to suit his vision. He was laying a trap not only for the board, but for the company itself. If regulators caught wind, Transcend could collapse overnight. Claire knew better than to confront him directly. Victor thrived on public battles, turning opponents into old guards who couldn't keep up with innovation. But she also knew she couldn't stand by. 15 years of integrity couldn't be erased by a showman's pen. That night, she opened a private drive, one no one in IT could track. For months, she quietly mirrored every ledger she managed, building what she privately called her silent book. It wasn't just accounting, it was a record of truth. Every manipulated figure, every questionable transfer, every inflated valuation sat there like evidence waiting for the right courtroom. The more she gathered, the heavier the weight became. She knew exposure carried risk. Victor had powerful allies on the board, and anyone challenging him faced isolation, maybe termination. Still, Claire's instincts told her patience was her best weapon. She didn't need to fight him in his arena of speeches and spotlights. She needed him to walk into hers. Numbers, contracts, compliance. Weeks turned into months. Victor's gamble on overseas expansion became the board's favorite talking point. The stock price climbed, but Claire saw the cracks widening beneath. Debt ratios stretched thin, supplier invoices sat unpaid, and in her silent book, the red ink grew darker. Then came the announcement. Transcend would enter negotiations for a $400 million merger with Nordell Systems. Victor framed it as his masterpiece, the crown jewel that would put Transcend among global giants. The board erupted in applause. Claire, sitting quietly at the corner of the table, felt the chill of inevitability. A merger meant scrutiny. Nordell's auditors weren't fools. If they dug deep, they might stumble upon Victor's manipulations. Unless, of course, Victor found a way to bury the evidence first. That evening, Claire returned to her office. The city skyline glowed outside the tall windows, but she hardly noticed. Her silent book was ready, encrypted and mirrored in multiple safe locations. She had built it not just as a safeguard, but as a weapon, something that could not only defend her legacy, but also strike when Victor least expected it. She thought about leaving. She had offers from other firms over the years, positions that paid more, with less stress. But walking away now would mean abandoning the truth to Victor's lies, watching the company she had protected for over a decade fall into reckless hands. She couldn't do that. Transcend wasn't just an employer. It was part of her identity. Her phone buzzed with a late-night email from Victor. Board meeting tomorrow. Be ready with the Q2 projections. Keep them clean. No drama. Claire stared at the screen, a bitter smile forming. No drama was Victor's way of saying, don't contradict me. But the numbers themselves told a different story, one of debts, hidden behind shiny contracts. She closed her laptop and whispered to herself, one day, Victor. The books always balance. The next morning, the boardroom shimmered with anticipation. Victor strode in, radiating charm, shaking hands, promising the merger would secure their future. Claire sat with her reports neatly stacked, her expression calm. She had given the board the numbers, but she knew most of them would only hear Victor's voice. Still, she had time. The silent book wasn't for today. It was for the day Victor thought he had won. And that day, Claire promised herself, was coming soon. The boardroom applause faded as the meeting ended, but Claire Bennett stayed seated, carefully collecting her files while the others filed out in pairs of chatter. Victor Lang remained at the head of the table, basking in the glow of his own promises, his cufflinks flashing under the recessed lights. Claire, he said smoothly, leaning back in his chair. The numbers look clean. Just the way I like them. Claire kept her expression neutral. They're accurate. Victor grinned. Accurate, clean, it's all the same. What matters is that the board believes in the vision. And they do. She met his eyes, but only for a second. In that glance, she saw arrogance sharpened to a blade. He wasn't thanking her. He was warning her. Don't cause trouble. Don't question me. Claire walked out without a word, her heels echoing against the marble floor. She could feel Victor's gaze on her back, like a hawk circling prey. The following weeks were a storm of activity. Transcend's merger team worked overtime with Nordell Systems representatives, trading spreadsheets, proposals, and compliance documents. Victor moved through it all like a showman on stage, but Claire noticed the cracks widening faster. Vendors began sending overdue reminders. One of their financial partners quietly withdrew from an agreement, citing strategic differences. And Nordell's auditors, sharp, methodical, began asking questions. They wanted clarifications on cash reserves, supplier contracts, and international subsidiaries. Questions that brushed dangerously close to Victor's manipulations. At first, Victor deflected with charm. Minor discrepancies, he told the board. Nothing unusual in international trade. But Claire knew better. Minor discrepancies didn't require rerouting payments through 4 shell accounts. One night, as Claire sat at her desk, the office empty around her, she received an anonymous email. No subject line, no sender name, just a message. We know about the Singapore transfers. You're not the only one watching. Her breath caught. For months she had worked in silence, certain her silent book was her secret weapon. But someone else was digging too. Were they an ally or a threat? The next day, Claire tested the waters. She stayed after a finance committee meeting, speaking quietly with Ethan Ward, the head of compliance, a man known for his cautious loyalty to rules. Have you noticed? She asked carefully. Any unusual activity in Victor's overseas accounts? Ethan stiffened. His eyes flicked toward the door before he leaned in. Claire, don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Victor doesn't take kindly to interference. So you've seen something, she pressed. He shook his head quickly. I didn't say that. Just be careful. Then he walked away, leaving her with a chill that sank deep into her bones. Meanwhile, Victor tightened his control. He began moving trusted allies into key positions, loyal board members, aggressive managers who owed their promotions to him. He even tried to replace Claire's assistant, claiming efficiency, but Claire blocked the transfer with a quiet reminder of board protocols. Still, she knew her position was precarious. Victor couldn't fire her outright. Her reputation with regulators and auditors was too strong. But he could isolate her, discredit her, make her legacy disappear beneath his narrative of visionary leadership. Every day, she balanced on a razor's edge, doing her job flawlessly while quietly feeding her silent book. with more evidence. Her files now contained hundreds of pages, spreadsheets, contracts, emails she'd copied before Victor's allies could scrub them. Each entry was a nail in his coffin, yet timing was everything. Expose him too early, and he'd spin the story as a witch hunt. Too late, and Transcend might collapse with him, taking her career and the livelihoods of thousands with it. The breaking point came during a late afternoon board session. Nordell's auditors had flagged a $12 million discrepancy in supplier payments. Claire had warned about it months ago. Victor, however, dismissed it with a laugh. International vendors, gentlemen. It's the cost of doing global business. Don't worry, our accounts are solid. Then, turning toward Claire, he added pointedly, "Isn't that right?" Every face in the room turned toward her. For a moment, silence pressed like a weight on her chest. She could lie, protect him, and keep her place safe, or she could speak. Claire's voice was steady. "The auditors are correct. There are irregularities in those accounts. They require further review." The room shifted. A few board members exchanged uneasy glances. Victor's smile froze, then hardened into something colder. "Claire," he said softly, dangerously, "perhaps you're not up to date with the latest reconciliations." "We'll talk after." The meeting ended in tension. As the others left, Victor leaned close to her ear. His voice was venom wrapped in silk. "You think you're untouchable because of your years here, but legacies burn fast when I hold the match. Remember that." Claire didn't flinch. She only looked him in the eye and replied, "Matches burn both ways, Victor." That night, Claire sat alone in her apartment, staring at her laptop. The anonymous email haunted her. "You're not the only one watching. If someone else had evidence, they could strike at any time." And if they did, Claire might lose control of the narrative. She couldn't let Victor fall into someone else's hands, not when she had spent months preparing the truth. She opened her silent book. Page after page of numbers, contracts, and transactions stared back at her like silent witnesses. For the first time, she considered her next move not just as a protector of the company, but as its executioner. Victor Lang thought he had caged her. But Claire knew the cage was made of glass, and with one strike, she could shatter it. The only question was, when? The city never slept. But that night, Claire Bennett felt more awake than any neon sign glowing outside her apartment window. She sat at her dining table, papers spread like battle plans, the screen of her laptop casting a pale light on her tired face. Her silent book was complete. It wasn't just a collection of numbers anymore. It was a weapon sharper than any blade, a mirror that reflected every lie Victor Lang had told. But the anonymous message haunted her. "You're not the only one watching." She tapped her pen against the table, replaying the boardroom confrontation in her mind. Victor's threat still echoed. "Legacies burn fast when I hold the match." For years she had been the quiet guardian of truth, but now, truth itself had become a race. If someone else released evidence before she did, Victor could twist the fallout. He could paint her as a conspirator, someone complicit in the very fraud she had tried to stop. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Nordell Systems due diligence. Final review in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was her window. After that, Victor would try to close the merger, burying discrepancies under the chaos of restructured accounts. Once the ink dried, it would be nearly impossible to untangle the truth. Claire stood, poured herself black coffee, and whispered, 2 weeks. That's all I need. The next morning, Transcend's offices hummed with nervous energy. Victor Lang had summoned department heads for a progress update on the merger. His charisma was at full volume as he strutted across the boardroom floor, promising synergy, expansion, and global dominance. "Nordell wants innovation, and we'll give it to them," he declared, his hands slicing the air as if he were carving the future himself. "Claire, you'll back me up on the financials, won't you?" Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Claire adjusted her glasses, her tone calm. "The financials will speak for themselves," Victor chuckled. "Of course they will. Numbers don't lie, right?" The words dripped with mockery, but Claire didn't bite. She had learned long ago that silence was stronger than arguments. Let him think she was cautious, even afraid. The quieter she stayed, the less he would expect the storm she was preparing. After the meeting, Claire retreated to her office. She closed the blinds, locked the door, and opened her encrypted files. The evidence was overwhelming. Overvalued contracts, duplicate invoices, hidden liabilities, all funneled through a web of shell accounts. Each piece alone was suspicious. Together they were damning. She needed allies, but trust was dangerous. Ethan Ward from compliance had hinted at knowledge but had pulled back. If he feared Victor's wrath, he wouldn't risk open rebellion. The anonymous email suggested there were others watching, but allies in the shadows were as likely to betray her as help her. Still, she couldn't do this alone. Claire drafted a message on her personal laptop, addressed to a contact she hadn't spoken to in years. Rachel Myers, investigative journalist. The draft sat unsent. Journalists were nuclear weapons. Once launched, there was no control over the fallout. If Rachel ran with the story too soon, the company might collapse before the truth could be properly aimed at Victor. Thousands of employees could lose their jobs. Claire deleted the draft. Not yet. Timing was everything. That night, while reviewing more contracts, Claire noticed something chilling. A set of offshore transactions had been modified, digitally altered as if someone inside the system was scrubbing the trail. But she had copies in her silent book taken weeks before. Whoever was cleaning the files didn't realize the original truths had already been preserved. She leaned back in her chair, realization dawning. Victor wasn't acting alone. Someone in IT, maybe even finance, was helping him erase evidence. The anonymous email made more sense now. Another ghost in the system. But whose side were they on? Her phone rang, startling her. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Claire Bennett? A male voice asked. Yes, who is this? You don't know me, but I know what you're doing. You're collecting evidence on Lang. Her pulse quickened. Who is this? I can't say not yet, but you're not the only one building a file. If you want Lang to fall, we need to coordinate. Claire's throat went dry. And why should I trust you? Because if you don't, he'll bury both of us. The line clicked dead. She sat frozen, phone still in her hand. The walls of her apartment felt closer than ever. She wasn't alone, but whether that was salvation or damnation, she didn't know. The next day, Victor called her into his office. The view stretched across the skyline, his empire reflected in the glass. He poured himself a drink, motioning for her to sit. You've been with this company a long time, he began smoothly. 15 years. That's loyalty, and loyalty deserves reward. Claire said nothing. Victor leaned forward. After the merger, I'm planning to restructure the executive team. I could see you as CFO. A bigger office, bigger paycheck, your legacy sealed. All you have to do is stay in line. Don't get lost in the weeds of old numbers. The future is bigger than balance sheets. It was a bribe wrapped in flattery, but Claire saw the trap. If she accepted, she'd be complicit. If she refused, she'd mark herself as his enemy. She smiled faintly. I'll think about it. Victor's eyes narrowed. He knew she was stalling. Don't take too long. In this business, hesitation kills. That night, Claire stared at her reflection in her bathroom mirror. The offer of CFO echoed in her mind. For a fleeting second, she imagined it. Power, influence, recognition. Everything she had earned over 15 years. But then she saw the faces of junior employees, the families who depended on paychecks, the stockholders who trusted the numbers. If she accepted Victor's deal, she'd betray them all. No, she wasn't here to rise with him. She was here to watch him fall. Claire sat at her desk again, opened her laptop, and typed a single line in a new file. The balance sheet of truth is almost ready. Victor Lang won't survive the audit. She saved it under her silent book, smiled to herself and whispered, 2 weeks. The day of reckoning arrived with the weight of destiny. The Transcend boardroom, usually a temple of polished deals and quiet negotiations, felt like a battlefield. The sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the faces of men and women who had grown restless under Victor Lang's charm. At the far end of the table sat Claire Bennett, her folder resting neatly before her like a sword still in its sheath. Victor entered with his usual swagger, his tailored suit crisp, his smile radiating control. Today, he announced, marks the greatest leap in Transcend's history. The merger with Nordell will redefine everything. We are on the edge of victory. Polite applause followed. He turned to Claire, his eyes sharp as glass. And our books. Perfect as always, aren't they, Claire? For 15 years she had given quiet nods, allowing men like Victor to bask in undeserved glory. But not today. Claire stood, her voice steady, each word a blade. They're not perfect, she said. They're poisoned, gasps echoed. She slid her folder across the table to Nordell's auditors. Pages spilled out, evidence of falsified accounts, offshore laundering, debts hidden beneath layers of lies. Her silent book had finally spoken. Victor's smile cracked. This is manipulation. She's lying. But the auditors were already scanning, eyes widening, lips tightening. These entries, they match every red flag we've seen, one said. This isn't manipulation. This is fraud. The board erupted into chaos. Some shouted in disbelief, others whispered in horror. Victor slammed his fist onto the table. You think you can bring me down with paper? Claire's gaze never wavered. Not paper. The truth. Security was called. As guards escorted Victor from the room, his voice thundered down the corridor. Accusations, curses, desperate promises. But no one followed him. No one defended him. His empire of lies had collapsed in the span of a single meeting. In the days that followed, Transcend trembled, but did not fall. The merger was cancelled, investigations launched, and Victor Lang's name became synonymous with betrayal. The board turned slowly but surely to the woman they had once overlooked. Claire Bennett, the quiet accountant, the forgotten guardian, was no longer invisible. Colleagues passed her in the halls with respect in their eyes. She hadn't just saved the company, she had saved their livelihoods, their futures. One evening, as the office lights dimmed, Claire sat alone in the boardroom. The city glittered outside the windows, but her eyes rested on the empty chair at the head of the table, the chair Victor had claimed as his throne. She whispered to herself, calm and certain, the books always balance, and the truth always wins. Claire closed her folder, the silent book no longer a secret, but a legacy. Her legacy. If you enjoyed this story of power, betrayal, and revenge, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. More thrilling stories like this are on the way. Stories where truth rises, lies crumble, and justice always finds its voice.